Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ask the D&D Professors. I'm Scott Hannenberg. I'm one of the folks with Open the Gates Gaming, and today we're going to be hosting a conversation about the game Magic the Gathering, another Wizards of the Coast property, and accessibility. And just to sort of set things up, I wanted to flag off the top that the whole Ask the D&D Professors thing is an interesting framework for this for me personally because part of the joke with it is that we're supposed to be experts, professors who can answer questions with a certain degree of knowledge and wisdom. And I feel like I'm not bringing a lot of that to this conversation. I'm going to be trying to be like an open minded, inquisitive learner here because Open the Gates is my first accessibility forward project. I've been learning a lot while I've been part of the Open the Gates crew. And because as far as Magic goes, I love the game, I play it a lot, but I would describe myself as an enthusiastic, beginner intermediate with the game. Um, Hopefully, some of our guests can bring different perspectives and some more experience specifically into things. But uh, before we dive in, let me invite them to introduce themselves. So with us we have Frank, aka Black Halo. Um, Please introduce yourself.
Sure. I am Frank Fonseca Jr. I'm with the Dots RPG project. I am not a professor, so I am perhaps underqualified in that way. But I used to play Magic semi-professionally from about 2003 to 2008, 2009. So quite a while. I never made it anywhere near pros or world tours, but I made a little money, made a little product, and won prizes there. So I've been out of Magic for a little while, but my friends still play it, so I'm still kind of loosely connected to some of the community that way. And I do kind of keep my finger on the pulse in terms of what's trending and what people are doing right now. So hopefully, some of my older school expertise will come into play today.
Amazing. Awesome to have you with us. And we also have Will, aka Kukulane. Will, would you like to tell us a little about yourself and how you come to
Sure.
this?
Sure. Hi there, everybody. Will Foley, friend of OTG, second time here on Professor Cast, if you will. Uh, my experience, I'm like a three-time casual. I've dabbled in competitive. I started my Magic journey back in the old Urza's block, late 90s. Fell away from it, came back to it around Scars of Mirrodin and Innistrad. Fell away from it again,
Mhm.
and my daughter was recently exposed to Magic at summer camp, and that has spurred a whole line of questions. And then I brought up my old collection, and the eyes went big. And here I am getting back into digital format of Magic just to keep the flame alive and relearn the game for the third time in my life.
Yeah, Will, you might have the most experience on Arena. I haven't been playing much online. I do play in paper, and I'm fairly current with what's going on with the new set releases, but um, yeah, don't get to play online that much. And then, Frank, you've got this pro experience, which I'm really interested to have be part of the conversation.
Semi-pro.
Semi-pro, sure.
Distinction matters, right?
But maybe we should start because this is often a podcast about Dungeons and Dragons. For folks who are listening to the podcast and maybe play D&D, but haven't played Magic the Gathering so much, it might be a good idea to set up just a little bit about what this card game is all about. I imagine there's probably some overlap, some players who do both, but um, what are we talking about when we talk about Magic the Gathering, the game? Like, what are some of the things that you love about it? What are some of the things that you know maybe trip up new players coming to the game? Give us a sense of like what is the overall lay of the land when we're talking about access and this game, Magic the Gathering. Frank, maybe I'll kick it to you first.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, the bare bones, right? Magic is typically a dueling game, right? I think the standard mode is one-on-one. You build a deck of at least 60 cards, and the high concept is each player is playing a wizard, and the deck of cards represents their library of spells and resources, and they are using those spells and resources to reduce each other's life total. You start with 20 points, and the first person to get the opponent down to 0 is the winner. There's some other methods of winning, but that's a longer discussion. These days, I think the most popular mode of playing Magic is Commander, which is a different type of mode. You have a 100 card deck. You can only have one copy of each card you own in that deck, except for your basic land cards, and we'll talk about that, I think, a little later. But the ultimate goal is the same. Most commonly, I think Commander is played in a 4-person free for all, so 4 people at a table and kind of everyone swinging at one another. And there tends to be some politicking involved in that, right? You negotiate with other players. Don't swing at me this turn. Or don't use this resource on me, and I'll cast this spell on your behalf. And it's a very different formula. I think that's the most popular modern mode of play. In terms of access, I mean, I think Magic, especially now, is a pretty abstruse game, and access is very challenging, and that's why we are going to talk about it today. We're going to maybe try and pull back the veil and make this game a little easier to gain access to.
Absolutely. Yeah, Will, let me ask you. So we hinted at this idea that there are different ways to play the game, different formats they call it, whether it's the one-on-one or this sort of free-for-all politicky table. What are some of your favorite formats? How do you mostly find yourself playing the game, or what's your favorite way to play?
I think because I'm an adult with a job and kids and pets and all these other obligations, the digital format for me personally nowadays is my favorite, only because I can play it on my terms. It does, it has all the matchmaking, you know, and there's still a fair degree of customizability. There used to be some older digital formats on the old Xbox 360 that I think was one of the first consoles to have it, and there was not as much customizability, but it was still fun. And you could play with someone else side by side, two-headed giant style, as two-player versus two-player mode is called, and that's pretty fun. But I do remember when it was called EDH instead of Commander. But I did have a Glissa the Trader deck as my first Commander deck, and I live with somebody who was very into competitive Magic, and we would have like I think it was a 7 or 8 player game around this kitchen table, and I can confirm it's one heck of a ride, and
Yeah,
it's a marathon. You're in for a long haul with that type of a game, and it's the shenanigans are fun. It is pretty fun. It is fun, but
I've played a little bit of Commander, and I feel like, yeah, even in a 3 or 4 person game, well, even in a 1v1 game, the game can be a lot to keep track of everything that's happening. And 7 or 8 players, that sounds absolutely wild.
yes, it is. But I mean, for most people, I think if especially because what I like about the digital format is it does a lot of the work for you. You don't have to worry about tapping lands to pay for your spells, making sure you have the right amount. You don't have to worry about your opponent doing the same. You don't have to
Mm,
keep tabs on them as much because the computer kind of by program does it all for you. So you
yeah,
just have to worry about what you have in your hand and what you're going to play and reacting to whatever your opponent is doing. But for the
yeah.
most part, that's why I like that. It takes a lot of the nitty gritty stuff out. You can just play.
Hmm. And I think we're already hinting at one of the big access challenges to the game, which is just the complexity of it. I know that's something that's come up as we've been chatting with each other, is just how much there can be to keep track of, or how many important relevant details there are to learn as you're learning the game before you even feel like you're ready to keep track of what's happening or understand the basic flow, the back and forth of a game. What are some of the ways that that complexity shows up? And yeah, what are some of the ways that you've seen it trip people up, whether they're getting to know the game or whether they already maybe have played for years?
Well, I can say that the game, because of its nature, I think has a pretty significantly high skill ceiling in terms of the more you know about the cards, if you can read, if you're playing, especially if you're playing competitively, it's one thing if you're all casual around a kitchen table, but if you're competitive and you are playing and you see what kind of cards your opponent is playing, you can home in on what kind of deck they have and what strategy they're likely to employ, and you start playing the chess match in your head of okay, what are they likely to do? And the more, that's a pretty significant cognitive load because you're trying to figure out and game out what you can play, but also anticipate what they're going to play.
Mm.
And if you do that well and you don't make as many mistakes as your opponent, you're more likely to win, perhaps. But it's kind of like poker, where sometimes the luck is not in your favor, and
Yeah.
there's not much you can do. But it's a game about trying to manage probability and play the best game you can with the cards you're dealt.
Yeah, and I guess you just need so much knowledge of what to expect or how the cards work before you can even start to think about calculating those probabilities and making informed decisions during the game.
Exactly.
Frank, did you want to jump in on the complexity question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was going to jump in right on where you were commenting, right? It's having knowledge of cards is such an essential aspect of play. And I think now that the game has been out since the 90s, right? And there's just such an accretion of keywords and, jargon, and they're always developing new abilities and new text and new styles of play. It's impossible for any one person to keep it all in their head. Thankfully, there's different sort of brackets and different categories of Magic where types of cards or ages of cards are legal or not illegal. So it does narrow the field a little bit, but still, really, it's there's so much to know, and that's an important barrier to play. Whether you're playing a standard game, right? So the deck is pre-constructed, and each person is bringing sort of their best out of their collection, or like draft environments, I think magnifies the need to know what's in play. For those who don't know what a draft game is, there are sort of randomly selected cards in a pool. Typically, each player would kind of buy in. They're purchasing a certain number of packs. And then you open your pack, you draft one card from it, and you pass the pack along to another player. And that kind of goes around until all the packs are exhausted. And you've got to try and make a deck. You muster a deck out of the card pool of all blind cards. So it's a matter of, well, knowing what's good, right? Having a strength, knowing what color of Magic you like to play, where you're strategically strong, knowing what other cards are in the pool, right? Sometimes you have to make a choice between, well, do I pick this card that's going to help my deck, or do I pick this card and keep it away from somebody else at the table, right? Like, you're going to play this card, but it's important that somebody else at the table doesn't have it because it will shut your deck down.
Hmm.
How do you know that? There's so much data to process that it's exciting and engaging if you have those mental muscles. But if you're a new person being thrown in, it can be very, very dense to get
Be
into the
very
flow.
daunting. Very
Yeah.
daunting, yeah.
Yeah. Um, we maybe should also talk about actually, Atlas. I'm realizing I maybe forgot to ask you to crop something that I shared in the Discord. It's that the graph. Do you have that handy, or is that we can maybe talk our way
Uh,
around it without
give
the
me
actual
about
visual?
30 seconds and I can have it up.
Okay, I'll set it up. Um, thanks, Atlas. So basically, this is something that we were talking before the stream about how the text on the cards has gotten more and more. Well, there's just been more and more text put on cards recently, and talking about how some of these simpler cards with maybe like one line of text um, read like other card games. There's not too much information to process if you understand what some of the mechanics do and what the text on these cards means. You can quickly scan a card and understand, okay, I know what to do with this if I'm building a deck. But there are other cards that have come out more and more frequently recently that have just paragraphs of text on them that you have to chew through before you're even ready to put that card in a deck or try to play it, let alone understanding how it's going to interact with all of the other cards that are on the field. Um, so yeah, Atlas, if you've got the graph, basically this shows just average card text over the years. I think it goes all the way back to the 90s since Magic's inception. And you should notice the scale on the side. It starts, I think, at 14 and goes up to 30 or so. So it's not quite as aggressive as it might look like on the graph, but even still, there's a very clear trend going on here towards more language on the cards, more complexity, more difficulty to even get started playing this game. Um, yeah, I don't know. Do either of you have thoughts about that? Is that something you've noticed in your own experiences with the game?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Over time, the amount of words that appear on a card has just ballooned. I know we were talking about this a little earlier today. It's like I do have a small charitable stance that I think some of that is due to the accelerated rate of putting out sets. Right, there's less time
Mhm.
letting those cards cook in the design phase and refining the language that goes on them. But that's definitely not all of it. Like some of it is intentionally printed and created to be complex.
Yeah,
I think there's like a power creep element to it where they're trying to still keep players interested by putting things out that can do more complicated things, and therefore maybe there's combos they can discover. It kind of creates the element of discovering new metas and things like that for competitive play. But yeah, back in my day, yeah, I remember when a card would just say first strike on it, or just whatever keyword it was, and that was it. And most complicated
Mhm.
cards were generally if it told you to draw cards and then discard a card, or maybe a few things happen at once. But that was about it. There wasn't a lot to it. And then I remember coming back to the game, and it was like, yeah, New Phyrexia, I think, was the block that was on its way out. Where and I remember reading some of these. I'm like, wow, there's like whole paragraphs in some of these cards now, and it's just so
Mm.
much going on. It's very dense, but those often have a lot of interesting interplay with other cards. So they have to be either they have to avoid things being broken by saying only in these certain situations can you do certain things. So they have to kind of like put these little disclaimers in there, uh,
Yeah.
and only in certain situations can this you know certain spell work or certain that. But
Hmm.
it, yeah, I've seen it firsthand. Coming back, it was kind of interesting to absorb all the new mechanics that have been introduced since I remember playing way back in the 90s. And then even jumping from then till now to like to 2025 and seeing all the sets that I've missed in some of that time, last few years at least.
Yeah.
Uh, all the different things that I see now on the digital format, which are to add even more complication. There are certain things that are digital only because they
Right.
can't help themselves, I think. Uh, and so it just there's even more to learn. It's like and to anybody who does jump into arena, it is like drinking from the fire hose. That's normal. Uh, there's a
Right.
lot that you're going to see all at once if even if you're familiar with Magic but you've never played online digitally. Uh, it bombards you with a lot of information real fast.
Yeah.
And
Atlas, just for folks who are maybe new to the game, could we pull up a couple of the examples? So I think one card that we had set up was Murder. This is a card. I don't know when this was first released, I guess, but it's at least a decade old. It's had multiple printings. It's come up in several different sets, and this is a card that is very simple. You'll see destroy target creature. I think even not knowing much about the game, um, probably gives a decent sense of what to expect, how to play that card, when you would want to play it. Um, so that's about as simple as I could think of, short of a creature with no extra text on it, sort of thing. Um, but then you've got cards like I've got Thassa's Oracle pulled aside, and Dothy Voidwalker, I think was the other one I picked, and both of these cards. Um, I mean, I don't even want to try to remember half the text on them. Um, like
yeah.
it's just a wall. It's impenetrable. And just to imagine like being a player sitting down at a table and seeing one of these cards show up in a pack for the first time, and you're supposed to decide, do I want this card in my deck? Do I not want to play with it? Is this going to be powerful? It's just an overwhelming thing to imagine asking someone to do. Um, this is the sort of card that even after you've played with it 10 times and you know it pretty well and you put it in your deck, you still have to double check the details just about every time you play it. And um, but I don't know, something that was coming up, Will, when you were talking through that is this idea that some of the enfranchised players maybe are looking for that complexity, or that the game designers are like trying to put it out there to keep upping the stakes for players because they're looking for that. Um, I don't know. How would you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, my engineering brain kind of looks at it as it's like a series of inputs and outputs, right?
Mhm.
And these cards, the more inputs they have, the more outputs they have. Especially, you could have cards where you just tap it and it does something, or you tap it but you also pay a mana cost for something, and then it does something completely different. And they're like Swiss Army knives for cards,
Yeah,
where they pack a lot of functionality into one card, or they're just trying to cover a lot of ground, and especially with like some of the cards that you're talking about. And I feel like historically, maybe uh, one of you could confirm this idea, but I feel like blue and black have historically been some of the more verbose cards in the history of Magic. Because blue always has a lot of text about drawing cards and what you do with those cards and when you can do with them. And black has a lot of like, well, first you got to sacrifice a creature, and then maybe you got to pay some life, and then maybe you could destroy some. Like, so there's a few steps in a lot of black cards like that,
yeah,
but but I think it boils down to, hey, we introduce these mechanics, now we have to have these cards that build off of these mechanics, but to
yeah,
do that we have to come up with some sort of input to interplay with that mechanic, and then you get
yeah,
something cool at the end of it if you've done all these steps to get this combo off, or to make
yeah.
full use of this mechanic to the fullest extent. um, then
Well,
you get.
speaking of combining cards, Frank, you had a whole set pulled together that demonstrates this kind of. It's not just knowing what one card does, but it's. I'll let you explain it.
No, absolutely. That's a valid point. But before we cut to that, if Gibson
Sure.
gives it on the screen, that's cool. Leave it there. We'll cut to that in a second. But um, I think, yeah, to Will's point, black and blue, I think, are the colors of Magic that are kind of most associated with, if not complex cards, definitely complex forms of play. Right? Your attitude there is mostly to control what the opponent is doing and basically not let them play the game to the best of your ability. Whereas the other three cards tend to be a little more fair play, or a little more, one-on-one aggressive, right? We're gonna bump our creatures against each other and see who's got the biggest. Um, but yeah, like sometimes complexity is not just about how much language is on the card or how jargony that language is. Murder's a great example of a simple card, right? Destroy target creature. That's any new player can probably grasp that concept pretty easily. But sometimes a card will have pretty plain language, but still be confusing, right? So
Mhm.
we've got Gifts Ungiven on the screen. This is a good example. It's mostly plain language on there. I think Graveyard is really the only game term on this card. But very simply, you search your deck for, I guess library is also a game term. But you search your deck for 4 cards that are all different, right? So you can't have multiples of the same card, and then your opponent gets a choice. And the idea here is that you want to give them an impossible choice, right? You want to make this, no matter which way they go, it needs to be a bad choice for them. But even though the print on this card is very simple, how do you know which cards to put in your deck to make this a win condition, right? It cuts back to that you need existing knowledge. You need knowledge of existing cards. You need to know what's legal in your current format of play. You need to know what's counterable and what isn't, right? What is going to force the result that you want? Um, and we can cut to maybe the 4 companion cards that we have. I'm not going to read all the text on these cards. Hopefully, they will be on the screen long enough for anyone who's watching to go over them. But the gist of this combination is that you want to force 2 really large controlling creatures onto the battlefield. But since the opponent gets the choice here, right? They're not going to put those creatures in your hand. Not if they know how to play the game, right? So they're going to force you to discard those cards. So then you want to leave yourself with the abilities to get those cards out of the graveyard, right?
Mhm.
So you have Unburial Rites basically lets you pull a card from a graveyard and put it back into play. It's like, all right, great. You forced me to discard these cards that I wanted. Guess what? They're coming back. And in the situation where the player does give you the cards, really you kind of don't want to play these cards directly from your hand because they're super expensive. So the joke of this is you actually want to play Faithful Mending and then draw 2 cards. It doesn't matter what those 2 cards are drawing are, right? What the 2 new cards from your deck, totally irrelevant. The part of this card that matters is you get to discard 2 cards from your hand. Guess which ones are going? The 2 big creatures. You're going to force them into the graveyard anyway, and then get them back out of it for cheap, right? You're going to pay 5 or 4 mana to get, a 6 or 7 mana creature onto the battlefield. And then if you cast it on Sharam, it brings the other card with it. It brings Magister Sphinx with it. So you get a 2-for-1. And basically next turn you win the game. This is really a good example of how complex the game can be, even in a situation where the language on the card, gifts and gifts, very plain and very simple.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
there's
that's
that cognitive load associated with like not just understanding the different zones in the game, what's on the battlefield, what's in the graveyard, what's in my deck or my library, but also the different ways that things can interact and move from place to place, knowing that all of these cards exist for one thing. Some of these cards I'd never seen before when you showed us this.
Me too. Like these are mostly new to me. Back when I was playing, right, it was like Yawgmoth's Will or Sundering Titan. It was a different combination of cards, but the concept
Yeah.
was the same. 2 big bruisers, two cards that will close out the game, and then 2 cards that will force them back into your hand when your opponent inevitably forces you to discard those cards you actually want.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of combo that when I see it happen, I'm like, I've been had. like, like that's just like, well, you're one of those players. You
Yeah.
build one of those decks.
If you're not in
Where,
a pro playing environment, it can be pretty disrespectful, right? So like it doesn't feel good to have that played against you. And I'll be honest, it doesn't feel good to play either, right? Like maybe the first 2 times you do it, you feel, you feel smart, but it just feels kind of dirty, and it feels like the thing you have to do when you're competing, right? You want to win that prize, you want to win that money, you want to win that box of cards, whatever it is.
yeah,
And it's important that you're for if it's a job for you, it's an investment of time and effort, and you've got to walk away with a payoff.
Yeah.
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 I don't have the cards, but was reminded of literally one of the first 2 Brawl, which is what they call Commander on Arena. Don't ask me why they differentiate that. Um, but literally, I think it was the second game I played, and I have one of those stock basic decks that they give you to try out, and I'm playing against somebody who uses some combo with the One Ring and Karn, and all of a sudden, like the battlefield's filling up with cards on their side, and I'm just sitting here going, "Oh no." Like, oh, my little kitty cat deck isn't going to help. Oh no. Well, at that point, I was just intrigued. And I let the comment, like, how is this working? Wait, what's he doing? What?
Yeah.
And I'm just watching this thing play out. I'm like, it's taking you 2 solid minutes of just activating cards and doing things just to get this combo off. And it was incredible to watch, but I was like, clearly there's no matchmaking.
No.
There's my skill level, my brand new skill level to the game that the game knows jolly well that I haven't played that many games, and yet
Yeah.
here we are thrown right into the deep end. But I thought it was amusing more than anything. But at a certain point, you realize, yeah, that person has really studied what's out there, because you. That's the other beautiful thing too, is if you do some research, you can find these things and you can emulate them. But kind of have to know what you're doing, and if you're purchasing these cards, the actual cards, who knows how much money you could invest in a deck like that. I'm sure that combo, especially if it was in its prime with competitive play, I'm sure that was expensive.
Yeah, it can be.
but I mean,
Yeah.
uh,
Well,
go. I just was going to expand on it with because when I was learning how to play again, um, I was teaching my wife, then fiance, how to play the game, and I actually just asked her a couple days ago what it was like to learn the game from her perspective, because it started off with pre-constructed decks where we were just taking a pre-constructed, and I handed it to her. I explained, just kind of walking through the game slowly. I was playing a pre-constructed, I think, at the time too. Um, And then, but when it came to building, there was like a tectonic shift in the, I'd say the difficulty, the challenge when it came to making your own deck and wanting to build the best deck possible, and especially because we played with people that I knew that were ruthless, uh, to try and make something competitive with them was a challenge, and it was a challenge for me, and I knew how to play the game. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think when it comes to accessibility, I think just keeping the scope small helps a lot, and it could be more fun because you can just master one thing and then kind of slowly expand your skills from there.
Yeah. Yeah, Frank, I remember you saying something about there are two ways to play the game. You can play it to win, or you can play it to have fun, and the two don't work together.
Usually they don't, in my experience, right? Like there's a sweet spot, and I think we're on a good position to segue into. Well, we've talked about how hard this game can be to get into.
Yeah.
Let's kind of ease the road and make it easier for people to sort of penetrate into this hobby. But yeah, I think if you are fully optimizing your deck, you will optimize the fun right out of that thing. And it's
Right.
unfortunate that the game has that kind of level of depth. And again, like especially in a professional environment or semi-professional play, right? If you're competing for a prize, you want that prize, man. And kind of you got to pay to travel. You got to pay an admission fee. You may have to pay to buy packs if it's a draft tournament. So you're shelling out cash, and you want a return. So
Yeah.
you kind of get conditioned. But even people who aren't playing tournaments, they're just hyper competitive, or they want to do the best, but you do
Yeah.
the best, and the fun gets erased in the process of that. So
No, I
Yeah,
can be a pretty competitive person, and I've had that feeling myself, even just at the local game store, of thinking like, oh, I want to win some packs, I want to win some prizes. Like I've got to be as cutthroat as I can, and that's not always the version of me that's the most fun to hang out with either. It's me trying to be, a power gamer or whatever.
yeah, especially when you're playing with people who you maybe not don't know that well. Maybe you've seen them
Yeah.
around the game store, but you sit down and you have no idea how intense this person can be. And
Mm.
some people treat it far more seriously than other people do, and they'll like question every single move you do. They want to see every card that you play to confirm what the card is doing is what you're saying is they're going to do, and that can
Yeah.
also take some of the fun out of it because
Yeah.
if you're not, you know, if you're playing in that kind of environment, it can be intimidating.
yeah.
If you're just playing
Mhm.
with friends, it's not not a big deal. If you're low stakes, it could be a little more fun because it's casual.
So,
I mean,
so
I
how
think
do
my
we get
oh
or
sorry.
just so how do we get for those who do want to play for fun, how do we get people to the table? How do we break down some of those barriers that are stopping people from playing the game or from enjoying the game? Um,
Yeah, I think Will mentioned one early on. It's Magic Arena. I think is largely a pretty good platform. It's got flaws like everything does, but we've already heard examples of if you're playing a complex combo, it's going to carry much of the mechanical load of executing that, right? Like I know I shared kind of a meme picture, a combination earlier today of Tifa having 3 million power, right? And it's like it's a simple thing to do where you're doubling her power 25 times in a row, but having to sit there and actually do it, you're gonna break out a calculator to get that done. But Magic did it instantly, right? It knew, all right, you drew 25 land, she's got a landfall ability, multiply her power, and now she's a monster. Um, so yeah, I think Magic Arena is a pretty good entryway for a lot of reasons, right? If you live kind of in an isolated place, you don't have a play pod, you don't have people who are playing Magic near you. You now have access to the entire globe of Magic players.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's no matchmaking, right? So you're going to get thrown into the deep end, and you're going to be paired with people who are just going to destroy you. But if you are ready for that, if you know that going in, maybe you can be resilient and understanding. Maybe you can talk some of your friends into getting on Arena. And it's like, well, let's just play amongst each other. We're both going to have kind of low level, entry level cards, and it'll be fair. It'll be fun, and we can learn and buy new cards together. So I don't use Arena, so I'm gonna kick it over to you. Will. Maybe you can
Yeah,
do
I would definitely suggest if you don't want to invest a single penny into it before you know if you like the game, Arena is free. They'll throw a bunch of things at you, but in the tutorial that it immediately jumps you into before you really have a chance to do anything, it does a pretty good job of holding your hand through uh, several. It kind of builds you up. It kind of just starts with the basics, and then there's a bunch of preset matches that kind of slowly introduce more mechanics as you go. And there is an AI bot mode. There's like one. It's very basic, but you can play some decks against an AI called Spark, I think, and you can do it over and over again. And until you're comfortable doing something else. But there's also other modes you can play where they give you a pre-constructed. I call it a basic deck. I don't know what else to call it, but they are two color decks, and they feature one of the mechanics that are in vogue right now in each deck. So you get a chance to experience what those there's different combos in each deck. There's different mechanics, the keywords like morbid come to my mind, where something happens if your creature goes into the graveyard, in that turn. Maybe a creature gets a bonus, things like that, and you can kind of experiment with all those different colors to your heart's content and see if there's one that kind of speaks to you before you start looking at maybe building your own deck. And you can do that over and over again. There's no limit to it. You can all the daily quests they give you. If you like, Skinner box things where you get rewards, that's a fun game for you there. That gives you, you know, things to look forward to there. Um, and yeah, again, it's free, so it's a great way to start if you don't even know you like Magic, because it can get expensive really fast. But if you do want to make the jump, game stores online, you can find pre-constructed decks that are usually featuring cards that are from the current sets. You can probably find some from the older sets too. But if you have some people you want to play with, and you're like, yeah, let's do this IRL. You want to do this at a table or wherever at school. Yeah, pre-constructed decks are probably the way to go, because you can kind of look at what you got. It kind of does the work of having the right ratio of lands to spells, things like that. All the things that you have to worry about when you're building it yourself, but inexperienced players may run into certain pitfalls that make the game less fun.
Yeah.
We talked about like Will. I know you had pulled a couple screenshots from Arena, I think,
Oh
or
yeah,
um, and so it sounds like it's an awesome tool for getting started with the game. It's an awesome place for beginners to go. Um, there's a couple of maybe improvements that could be made to the interface. It sounded like.
some caveats perhaps, yeah, going into it, because it's an official app. Um, I will say, if you're playing it for the first time, I recommend maybe doing it on a desktop or a laptop, because the screen's a bit bigger. And this is the pitfall. A lot of card games, if you've ever played Hearthstone, which is a Blizzard game, uh, the smaller the screen gets, the tougher it is to see what's going on. You have your hand, you have the battlefield, where all the cards are. You have your opponent, if you want to see how many cards are left in their deck or in their hand or in their graveyard. There's a lot. The UI it has to breathe a little bit, and if you have big fingers like me, trying to like poke at things on a small screen can be a bit of a challenge. And then yeah, even though I don't need glasses, the game makes me feel like I do, because of how small the text is. I have to turn the brightness all the way up the screen. But if you, Alice, there are some of the, I don't know if you want to begin with any particular one of those settings, because I was curious what kind of accessibility options there were in preparation for this talk.
Yeah.
What Because every game, not every game, most games offer a lot in the way of accessibility. Whether, let's say, you're colorblind, maybe red green or one of the other types, you know, they offer modes that will account for that. And
Hmm.
I was just curious to see what the game offered. So I don't know which screen I'll start with, but I mean, long story short, though, is I didn't see a whole lot.
Yeah.
Uh, I
Yeah.
mean, if as far as the graphic goes, I think the one thing someone pointed out, excuse me, was alternative art styles can be hidden.
Yeah, the alt art can sometimes be very dramatically different from the art that you maybe associate with a card in your mind, and that might be something that trips you up if you're a card and then you see something completely unfamiliar to you. That might throw you for a loop. Atlas, I think we had an example for that as well. Was it
Yes,
the
you were
Landwar Elf?
looking at
Yes.
Llanwar Elf.
Yeah, so, the first time I saw this card, I had no idea what it was because I saw it on a phone, on my phone screen. And I apologize, I'm coming down with something. But even on this screen, as I'm looking at it on the stream, I mean, the artwork is beautiful. It catches your eye. It draws you to what's going on in the background. But then you're like, what does it do?
Right.
And it's one of the most common, one of the older cards, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very popular card. It's if you're running a green deck, this card likely is in it.
And it's
This
also
is
very
another one of those
simple
cards that's been. Sorry, what was that, Frank?
it's also a very simple card, right? It's not a
Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
simple.
simple
Um,
card, one line of text, and this is another one that's been printed, at least 10, maybe 20 times even.
ad nauseum, yeah. But this design, I mean, it's called an alternative art style, so it's optional. I don't know how you actually unlock it if you buy it or if you can unlock it some other way. But if you don't want to see those, you can turn those off on your side, and then you'll never see that ever again.
Yeah.
I think that is a bit of a shame because there are art styles that are not as busy as this, that are like they have a depth to it,
Mm.
like a 3 dimension to it, and those can be really interesting and fun. And they don't hurt the accessibility at all because they still have like a shaded window, so you can see the text very easily.
Yeah.
But this
Yeah.
one was just one of those. They have a tendency to have these full art cards that are great. They're artistic, fantastic, but
Yeah.
on a little cell phone that can really throw you off.
And like
Yeah.
the reason I consider that a decent accessibility option is like just again, particularly if someone who's new to the game, right? They may have seen a vanilla Llanowar elf. It's like, okay, I know what that card is. So that's something that knowledge that they've earned in order to play the game, right? They've gotten access to the game by understanding it better. But if that card has printed 50 times and it has 17 different images, every
Yeah.
time you see a new image of that card, you're gonna have to stop and read it, and then you're gonna have that moment, oh, it's just a Llanowar elf, right? And
Yes.
that's time taken away from you playing your own strategy, and like you're learning, but you're not really learning anything new. It's just
Yeah.
vanity aspect is kind of throwing you off the scent a little bit. Now again, a lot of that alternate art is beautiful and like foil options, but if you want to simplify your game, turn off the alternate art at least until you're very comfortable. That's
Yes.
something that I would recommend to a new player for sure.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't help that this is one, I think, bone of contention in the community is that, and they do it for a reason that you can probably imagine, is because you're playing against somebody on the internet. What happens if you're a sore loser? You might sit on your hands and not play a card. So what they have is that there's a timer. So if it's your turn or if it's your opponent's turn, you'll see this little bar appear and it kind of scrolls across like a fuse ticking down, right? And you have a certain amount of timeouts that can get used up before you basically you'll get auto conceded and lose. But um, that's to prevent trolls from ruining people's fun because of dragging out a game that could be over and
Holding you hostage because they don't
yeah,
want
holding you hostage exactly because they'll maybe just walk away and whatever. Uh, but at the same time, when you're trying to read a card that's a little more verbose, or you're trying to figure out what it is that you're seeing in front of you, and meanwhile, then you start seeing that thing tick down, and you realize, oh, okay, I got to figure out what I'm going to do now. And
That sounds so stressful if you're new to the game and that starts
yeah,
happening.
and I think everybody reacts to that differently. When you are put on like a timetable and it's visual, it's right in front of you. I think some people might react to that a little poorly. I think it depends. Your mileage may vary, but um, I think that's the one thing about ease of understanding what's in front of you on this digital format is helpful, and that's why I recommend starting. If you're going to start with it, start on a desktop where it's a nice big screen, hopefully, and not this little one on your phone. And if your phone's your
Mhm.
only option, it's better than nothing. But just go in knowing that you may have to finagle cards to read what's going on and have
there's
to
a lot
grasp
of
what's going on.
Yeah, it's a lot of data fighting for not a lot of real estate on your.
Yes. Yeah, and
Right.
I've auto closed the app accidentally because I'm trying to
Oh
flick
no!
the card up to to see what the card is. You have to kind of tap and drag it up, and then I'm like, oh, it just it thought I was hitting too close to the border, and so it just closes the app, and it's just like, oh. But
Oh
then,
no.
but you can, if you're lucky and the internet is good to you, you'll be able to resume where you left off, but you might have burned through a timeout by the time you get loaded back into the game.
Sure.
So, but
Yeah.
that being said, there's not a lot. There's still not a lot. I feel like there could be more in terms of more options out there, at least for things. Like I'm surprised there's no colorblind settings. That seems like a pretty common thing you'll see, or even
Yeah.
just the intensity of a contrast or things like that. Um, there's just a lot of things that I wish was more customizable. To maybe doesn't distract you. There's animations that when someone plays a card that will happen, and it's okay, it's cool the first time they play the card, but then they bounce the card to their hand and they play it again and it replays the animation. It's just like okay, I get
Yeah.
it. But those are small gripes in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
But
No, it
it's
sounds like overall a great platform to start learning on, but they could be a little bit more thoughtful in how they
yeah,
implement parts of it. Um,
yeah, yeah.
let's shift to paper magic for a minute. Frank, maybe I'll turn it over to you for a minute. What are some of the things that you think you've seen stand in people's way of getting into paper magic, or some of the things that you think have like really opened up access to that? If I've got a friend who owns 3 or 4 or 10 or 12 decks and keeps on saying, "You've got to come over and play this game with me," what would you be on the lookout for to try and make that an experience that isn't going to be too overwhelming for you, or that's not going to shut you out of the game?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we can springboard off of Arena, right? We can still address probably the biggest barrier to entry for anyone, disabled or not, cost. Magic is expensive. It's an expensive hobby.
Hmm.
So how do you get, if you're not going to use a free app, how do you get inexpensive or free cards to play with? You mentioned a friend. I think a friend with a sufficiently large collection of Magic cards probably has some cards they can let go. So if your friend wants you to play,
I
I think
definitely do.
yeah, I think it's fair play to ask that friend to jumpstart your collection, right? Donate a deck to you, give you some insight, right? Like preload you with the knowledge you need to build a basic deck, right? Um, have them teach you the game. They want you to play with them, obviously, right? They're going to benefit because they got somebody new to play with, but they've got to onboard you. So hopefully they're a good teacher and they're generous with their belongings. If they aren't, there's some other avenues, right? There's a practice called proxying that is very popular. Do not do this in a tournament setting, right? You will get yourself banned from a tournament.
Yeah.
It's poor manners to say the least. But a proxying is basically you use another card to stand in for a card that you cannot afford or do not otherwise have access to. Some people will print proxies at home, whether they're good quality or not. That's up to you. There's also a pretty robust sales economy on like Etsy. You can buy complete commander decks of all 100% proxy cards. But your mileage may vary here. Like for me, it's a no-go because it's invariably AI images that are generated to produce these cards. That's not going to work for me ethically. It may work for you. So like no judgment on that, especially you're trying to break into an expensive hobby. That may be the way you have to go, right? If you drop $30 on a deck that would normally cost somebody $100, $200 based on the value of the strength of those cards, if you got legit versions, you're going to save a lot of money and decide whether this hobby's for you. If you like it enough and you want to make the investment down the line, you reconsider at that point.
Yeah. And we should say $100 or $200 for a commander deck might even be a low ball depending on what kind of commander deck we're talking. Like I guess you can get the pre-constructed ones for maybe I want to say $50 or $60 these days, maybe. But when
MSRP,
people
if you're lucky enough to get them at MSRP.
if you can get it at at MSRP. But then once people have bought singles and turned the dials on these decks, they can be up into the thousands easily.
For
Uh,
sure. Yeah. If you're
so
foiled out and if you've got Power 9 cards, and again, we're we're dipping into all the jargon that exists in this hobby, but like there's a lot of depth here, and that can mean a rich future, but it can mean a hard entryway. A couple of other things you can do to get cards on the cheap. Uh, most, I'm not going to say all because I'm sure there's an exception, but I would say most shops that sell cards, whether it's an RPG store or comic book store, whatever, they tend to have bargain bin cards, right? And this serves, a lot of purposes. A lot of people who are building new decks maybe need a copy of something that's worth 3 cents and they threw it away when they had it. It's like, well, now they need to go and find a copy. So it behooves a card shop to have bins of these cards as if somebody comes in, and granted, it's nickel cards, dime cards, but if they're going to buy 20 of them at a clip, and then while they're there, they're going to buy a box or they're going to buy some packs, right? That shop makes money letting cards go on the cheap. So if you're first breaking into the hobby, check with your local game store. See if they've got bargain bins. There's no shame in building budget decks out of budget cards, right? And then talk with your play group about, hey, this is the power level I'm at. This is the cost level that I can afford. Play with me, but like match my power. Don't stop me out of this hobby. Like let me break in. That's a great way to get started.
Yeah. Let's play for fun, not for the competitive side.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely important if you're playing in real life to have people that are kind of going into the game with the same expectations of how try hardy you want to be, because all it takes is one person to sort of up the ante, next thing you know, it kind of changes how everyone is approaching their decks. The next thing you know, you have a bunch of decks that are miserable to play against, or something like that, or you have, people playing Gifts Ungiven against you, and you're like, oh, okay, here we are.
Just rude. Don't do that.
It's just like, oh, here we are.
Or like you were saying, like you end up playing a combo that you think you have to play to be competitive, and you get to a point with
Exactly.
it where that's not even fun for you anymore.
Yeah, the next thing everyone's on the internet meta decking, as they call it, when you're looking up, decks that are hot and have high win rates, things like that. Because I will say the amount of data out there now is way more than there was like 10, 14 years ago. There was some back then, but I feel like the amount of, granted, some of it's self-reporting data, but uh, a lot of the information that's out there kind of gives you an idea of just how successful certain cards are, how popular some are. There's a reason why they're popular, and that's why they're expensive. So
Yeah.
there's always a reason. It's almost like a stock market where certain cards will be expensive, but then if you wait long enough,
Yeah,
they
they'll
might
drop.
yeah, they come.
Oftentimes because they've cycled out of legality, right? They're not legal to play
Yeah,
in official formats anymore. So now people who are playing around their kitchen table get more mileage out of it because they're cheap.
Mhm.
yeah. I was trying to
Um,
see what.
Another way to control cost and give people access, cost and complexity, right? There's a pretty, I mean, it's not super new, but to me, it's like a modern conceit of play called cubes. Right.
Yeah.
So typically cubes are a format where you're going to limit the environment, right? You're going to say, well, we're going to use cards from this set, or we're going to use cards from these 3 sets, or whatever. It's totally customizable. There's cubes out there that just say, well, only cards of this color, but any set, right? So all black cards ever printed,
Yeah.
but nothing else, right? So you can go online and find people who are playing in cubes. Draftmancer.com is a great online environment to see what people are playing. You can duplicate the cubes. You can play online directly if you want to do it that way. But again, if you just want to bring a cube idea to your friends locally, that's a good place to go to get inspiration. The idea of a cube is you're going to limit the scope. You're going to kind of like limited palette what cards are allowable to play, and then typically you're kind of creating an artificial draft environment. I would venture outside of that and say, if you don't like draft, you can still do this, right? Maybe you only like the Marvel cards, right? You just, oh man, I really want to play a Spider-Man and Wolverine deck, and I don't care about anything else Magic. Cool. Limit your cube to just that. And now your friends know, hey, we're going to play Marvel Cube today. And only Marvel cards are legal in this cube. And then make it constructed, right? Don't make it draft. Everybody brings their best 60 card deck. Obviously, you're probably gonna have to get a lot of proxies to do that, or you're gonna have to do it digitally online. Again, but that's gonna keep your costs down. It's gonna keep your complexity down, and you could play hundreds of games just with 50, 60 cards in your pool and never exhaust those options, right? You will always have a lot to learn. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Play the game for fun, play it with your friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Other than cost and complexity, and I do maybe want to circle back to the cube conversation more too, because um, Open the Gates is thinking about building cubes and having some of these different ways to get into the game at some of our events. We're still working on the details of all of that, but it does seem like a nice way to sort of, like you were saying, control, what's the range of cards that you're going to see. Let's just pick out some that are going to be a little bit easier on the eyes, for one thing, to actually read through the text there, but also try and make something that is cohesive and feels fun and interesting, but yeah, leaves aside some of the more daunting parts of the game, at least for starters. Um, but yeah, other than cost and complexity, what are some other access barriers that we've seen, and solutions to it, with this game?
I know that it's a very it's a there's a physical element to the game, right? You're like any other card game. You have to use your hands you have to shuffle, draw, hold cards in your hand. You have to be able to place and manipulate cards that are on the battlefield, like tapping cards, for example. You have to be able to pass cards to your opponent or receive them to kind of read what it is your opponent's playing, or they want to read what you're playing.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, everyone has different solutions in the department of managing your player life, right? Then there's counters that can be put on various cards, and people use different things for that. Whether it's dice, I've used D20 for my life totals.
Mhm.
Uh, there's dice for counters. Usually, those counters are self-evident depending on the card. Yeah, let's see. Then there's things like, well, you could do that a number of ways. You could also use pen and paper for keeping track of your life total. Some people use beads for tracking things. There's smartphone apps that are out there that I think are pretty good. I don't know if every competitive area will let you, but usually your opponent's keeping track of your own stuff alongside you, so it's not like the honor system comes into play a whole lot. But there are lots of smartphone apps. Last I checked, that
I've seen some really elaborate, like, craft versions of these, where you've got like something that spins on one side and maybe like
yeah,
a little dial, and that you can track different
sure.
aspects of the game on them.
Oh, I bet you can find a lot of things on like Etsy, or where
Definitely.
people will kind of design their own things 3D, especially with how prevalent 3D printing is nowadays. You could
Mm.
easily find more decorative options than using a D20.
Yep.
Yeah,
Wizard posted some really good like not deck, but like hand holders for like you're gonna put your hand of cards in kind of like a shelf, almost like a Scrabble shelf, right? So if
yep.
you have manual dexterity issues, challenges, right, you can just kind of set them up in front of you and they're fanned out, so you can always read and access those cards. So those are cool. That's something I hadn't even thought of. I didn't know it existed. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
And
manual
what's nice,
dexterity plays a part.
yeah, those are nice because they can be used many different ways, not just Magic the Gathering, but whether you like Pokemon or
Mhm.
if you're just regular any old card game, poker or whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, but there's those are the types of things that happens during the game. So there have to be solutions for that. Being able to pick up cards and you know uh, holding them is one thing, but being able to draw and manipulate them, there's
Mhm.
there's probably different. Those are things that anybody who has issues with hand mobility or anything like that, grip strength. I'm sure that's something that is ever present in life. So whatever solution may work for you in other
Yeah.
applications might work in that. But drawing cards can be pretty tricky because that even me I sometimes will, especially with if you use those plastic sleeves,
Yeah.
sometimes they stick. So if they're not very good ones, um,
Yeah.
but but I imagine I haven't seen anything that would help like somebody help draw a card unless it was like some sort of texture on the back or something.
So
It's something that doesn't mess with the ability to shuffle the cards, but gives you a little bit more than like a smooth plastic surface to grab onto.
there are tools that can grab a card flat off a table,
Yeah.
or even a stack of two or three
Oh,
that I've seen. I'm not sure about like from the top of a stack of 60 cards. That might be, maybe you have to knock a few over and then use this tool to pick them up or that sort of thing.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, something like a yeah. I imagine there's options out there. Suction cups could go well on plastic if you're using just the bare cards. Which no, I don't know many people who do that. But
It's
if you don't
rare.
really if you don't really care about maintaining the edges of your cards when you shuffle, then I could see
mhm.
people doing that. But I
And
can't
the
remember the last time.
shuffling's another thing. I mean, so Atlas is part of this project where we're thinking of building an Open the Gates cube. And one of the rules that was discussed early on, I think, was let's just not have cards that make you go search for another card inside your deck because that leads to more shuffling and can slow the
Yep,
game down, can just be a huge impediment to some players. So,
yep, yeah. And everyone has their different ways of shuffling, cutting the decks. I mean, I used to dole out different piles and then just stack the piles together and have your opponent cut. Not trying to shuffle things together the hard way. Sometimes with your plastic sleeves, it can be tough to kind of like compact the deck together.
Yeah.
Um, but other than that, I mean, that's like the hand dexterity aspect of it. But I mean,
mhm.
there's a lot of verbal and nonverbal communication that happens in the game. So, I could see the game, being difficult if for some reason. Yeah, I'm sure it could be done. I'm sure I fortunately haven't run into many people like if you're deaf or something and there's probably luckily the cards are self-explanatory. You can read them and see what's going on, but sometimes and if you're paying attention to what the person's doing, luckily the nonverbal aspect comes into play because it's pretty obvious when you're tapping your creatures,
Mhm.
attacking. That it could be pretty self-evident what you're doing.
But you're
Uh,
right that in the course of gameplay, there's a lot of communication that's also happening between the players. A lot of it is related to the specific cards and could be
yep,
communicated in other ways. But yeah, there's a lot of chatter
yeah,
that sort of creeps
yeah.
into the game.
Sometimes you ask like, "How many cards are in your graveyard?" Can I see your
Right.
graveyard? What's in your graveyard? And then you start, why do you want to see what's in my graveyard? but
I think all
but
of this highlights like another access need that I think unfortunately is just not met, right? Like the game does not meet the moment in terms of people with visual impairment, right?
yeah,
Mhm.
You need
yeah, I
to
think
be
that's
able
the
to
biggest hurdle. Yeah,
read your cards. A lot of them have small print because they're cramming a bunch of text. Kind of a lot of the enjoyment is looking at the beautiful artwork. You've got to be able to identify which color a card is versus another one, right? That like color matters
yeah,
in terms of
Mhm.
what cards can be played, what your resources produce, and like it is a highly visual game. And I don't know that even if like in a digital environment with a screen reader situation, I don't know that um, there is a way to effectively communicate the sheer amount of data that is important for a player to have from a magic card to someone who is blind or otherwise visually impaired. And I think that's super unfortunate. I wish I could say I knew what the solutions are here, but
Yeah.
I think identifying a problem is
yeah,
maybe the beginning to somebody with a bigger brain than I have solving that for someone. It'd be cool if blind folks could play magic. So.
Yeah.
And if there's
Okay,
anybody
so
out there who is blind who plays magic, please like comment
yeah,
on this
yeah,
video and prove me wrong. I would love to witness that happening
yeah,
get
and
involved in
know
our
how to navigate the
Discord.
game.
We would love
yeah,
to hear
yeah.
what's been working and yeah.
Yeah, this is where I thought it's like I wouldn't feel bad if someone had a proxy of Braille magic cards where it's a special card stock that's got Braille on it or something. But the
Mhm.
I'm sure some cards, given how verbose they are, would be a challenge to fit into something that would be easy enough for someone to manage. But yeah, I was trying to figure out what's out there, what people use. But part of the game is keeping information to you that you don't want the other person. And, there's a lot of technology that would be great, but you don't want a card reader that's reading text out loud to you. I mean, I guess you have a
Mhm.
headphone. You could have an earbud in, you know,
Yeah.
that tells you what's going on. If you have something that could read the card and tell you what it is. But then but because information is there's so much information in front of you, that you need to be aware of, knowing how many creatures there are, what creatures there are, you know, just keeping track of all those things would be hard to do. Um, so it's unfortunate, but I think that's probably the biggest hurdle, to make it more accessible for people who are visually impaired.
Yeah.
But
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about some of the hurdles and some of the things that are workable or some advice for folks. Maybe just to put a bow on things, what's one thing you hope folks take away about the game, or something that you want to share that we haven't had a chance to touch on yet?
I think for me, despite the amount of time we spent talking about how challenging entry can be, I really want people to feel encouraged to try and play this game, especially if you've got friends who are already playing. But even if you don't, right? If you're just curious and you're the only person in your friend group who has taken interest in Magic, there's a lot of people out there who play Magic. I think it's like the second most popular trading card game globally, and probably the first most popular in the North America. So lots of people play it. There's tons of ways to play it. Really, Commander, which I mentioned at the top of this, is the most popular format. There's really kind of like a user-made curb cut fashion of Magic, right? It wasn't official until it became popular enough to be adopted by Wizards of the Coast. So don't be afraid to kind of blaze new trails with this. There's lots of people who will happily welcome you into a Magic community. Again, Arena, a free way to play online. Draftmancer.com, a good way to look up what people are doing in terms of their cubes. And if you don't own cards yet, but when you want to practice building a deck, Moxfield, another free website application, you can build decks to your heart's content. You can look at other people's decks. They upload them freely and just copy them and say, well, I like this concept. Let me copy this. And then now I can iterate, right? I can edit this deck to make it a little more customizable for me rather than starting from scratch, right? That cuts down on a lot of the challenge of breaking in. But yeah, it's a deep, complex game, but there's a lot of payoff. So don't be afraid to give it a try.
Yeah.
yeah, I think I enjoy the game because it is a deep game. It's got a lot of strategy, and if you don't feel like playing one type of deck, you can switch to a different type of deck, and that yields a different experience.
Yeah.
I think that it is approachable, but it's kind of like you're looking at a mountain that you're about to climb, but you're just worried about getting to the next 100 feet. And that's it can be very daunting to do, and so I don't want anyone to be discouraged about that, which is why I think the free options that are out there and low cost options are out there. I would encourage people to investigate, because it's also a great way, even if maybe you don't have a broader group of friends that do it, but like I'm preparing to play the game with my kids pretty soon. My daughter is showing an interest in it. We'll see if that holds, but there's other things the game is doing that is keeping it from being stale. That is, I think, drawing in new audiences. I think this is actually pretty clever of Watson to do from a marketing and a branding standpoint. But things like they just had a set release with Final Fantasy, right? And I can imagine there's a lot of people out there who've never played Magic before but love Final Fantasy. And if you ever met a
Mhm.
Final Fantasy fan, they really love Final Fantasy. And would be willing to investigate the game and just see what's going on. And then there's other sets like Lord of the Rings. There's D&D sets, which makes sense. It's their own
Mhm.
IP. I think there's Marvel sets. There's like a Spider-Man one coming out, or if is on the way to coming out. But that way, it's like there's familiar IPs now being introduced into the game. It's a new way to experience it. It's kind of fun to explore. Like I'm not a huge Final Fantasy fan, but I'm looking at these cards and I know the characters. I know like certain things, and it's just it's new and it's interesting. It's fun. It's not as it's not as opaque to approach if there's familiar things on the game that you already like.
Yeah.
And that I think it's good for them to do from a business perspective, but it's also good as the customer to say, hey, oh, I know Spider-Man, or I'm a Spider-Man fan, or I'm a Marvel fan, or I'm a Lord of the Rings fan. Let me check it out. And you could build decks just all around those sets. You don't have to go crazy and draw from all these other sets out there. So I think the game is it's broad, it's deep, there's a lot going on, and I think it's easy to be discouraged to approach it because of it looks like you're getting into something that's overwhelming. Um,
Yeah.
but if you approach it the right way, you can kind of just dip your toe in it, and it won't scare you away.
Mhm.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, we wouldn't be talking about the game and spending the evening, chatting about access and all of the things that we'd like to see if we didn't love it, if it wasn't a great game, right?
Exactly.
Um,
I'm learning it for the third time in my life, and I feel like, yeah, it's like there's a reason why this game keeps pulling me back in. It's just there's very few things that I can say have done that to me.
yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you both for being here for this conversation. And if there are folks who want to join the conversation, who want to share stories about how they've had success or frustration with the game, we would love to hear from you. I think there's a link at our website where folks can reach out and contact, or you can join us on Discord and keep the conversation going. But yeah, let's leave it there for tonight. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks again to our guests, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for having us.